The automatic doors of the pharmacy slid open, admitting a gust of cold, rain-slicked air. Ronan Hayes didn't seem to notice. His entire world was focused on the small bottle the pharmacist was holding, a beacon of hope under the sterile fluorescent lights. Behind the counter, the pharmacist, a kind-faced man in his 50s with a name tag that read Mark, offered a sympathetic but firm shake of his head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes. That's the final price after your insurance. It's a specialized medication." Ronan's shoulders slumped, the movement so heavy it seemed to carry the weight of years of struggle. He ran a hand over his tired face, the rough stubble scratching his palm. $214.38, he whispered, the number a death sentence to his budget. His gaze flickered towards the door, as if he could see his 8-year-old daughter, Ilara, waiting for him in their small apartment, her breathing just a little too shallow, her smile a little too pale. He had counted every dollar, scraped together every last cent from his paycheck after rent, and utilities had taken their massive bites. He was short. Again. The familiar, sickening knot of failure tightened in his stomach. I have to put it back," he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Mark, the pharmacist, sighed softly. He saw this too often. Good people caught in impossible situations. He watched as Ronan pushed the prescription slip back across the counter, his hand trembling slightly. The movement was small, almost imperceptible, but it spoke volumes of the man's broken pride. Ronan turned without another word, his worn coat doing little to shield him from the chill that had nothing to do with the weather. He walked out into the unforgiving night, leaving his daughter's lifeline behind on the cold linoleum. He didn't see the woman standing in the next aisle, pretending to examine a box of high-end vitamins. Olivia Spencer, the CIO of Sterling Innovations, had a migraine clawing at her temples and had only stopped for her own prescription. Her day had been a brutal marathon of board meetings, hostile negotiations, and the constant crushing pressure of running a multi-billion-dollar tech firm. She lived in a world of data points, profit margins, and strategic takeovers. But the raw, quiet desperation in the man's voice had cut through her exhaustion like a shard of glass. She watched him go, a ghost in a worn coat disappearing into the rain. She saw the name on the prescription slip he'd left on the counter. Ronan Hayes. The name meant nothing to her. The man was a stranger. She told herself to forget it. It wasn't her problem. She had a company to run, a merger to finalize, 100 far more important things to worry about. But as she stepped up to the counter to collect her own medication, she couldn't shake the image of his trembling hand. Olivia's heart, a fortress she'd spent years building to survive in a cutthroat corporate world, felt an unfamiliar crack. Her own life was a monument to control and success, but it was also a profoundly lonely one. She was a single mother too, though her son, a teenager at a prestigious boarding school, wanted for nothing. She had never had to choose between medicine and food. She had never had to face the kind of failure that strips a parent of their dignity. The thought was a foreign, uncomfortable intrusion. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Mark asked, pulling her from her thoughts. "Yes," she said, her voice crisp and authoritative, the CEO mask snapping back into place. She paid for her prescription, her movements efficient and precise. But as she walked back to her sleek, black car, where her driver waited patiently, the armor felt thinner than usual. The rain hammered against the roof of the car, a frantic, angry rhythm. Through the rain-streaked window, she saw him again. Ronan Hayes. He was standing at a bus stop across the street, huddled under the flimsy shelter, his shoulders hunched against the wind. He wasn't just waiting for a bus. He was a man trying to figure out how he was going to face his sick little girl empty-handed. "Drive," Olivia commanded her driver, her voice sharper than she intended. The car pulled smoothly into traffic, leaving the bus stop and the lonely figure behind. But she couldn't leave the image behind. It was burned into her mind. All night, as she went over quarterly reports and merger documents in her sterile, silent penthouse apartment. The man's quiet despair was a deafening roar in her head. Ronan finally made it home an hour later, soaked to the bone and shivering. The old bus had been late, its engine groaning in protest with every stop. He quietly let himself into the small, two-bedroom apartment he and Alara called home. It was sparsely furnished but meticulously clean. Every surface was wiped down, every book on the small shelf was neatly aligned. It was a home filled with love, if not with things. "Daddy? Is that you?" a small voice called from the bedroom. Ronan took a deep breath, forcing a smile onto his face before he pushed the door open. "Hey, sweet pea, I'm home." Alara was propped up in bed, surrounded by pillows. Her face was pale, with faint blue shadows under her big, expressive brown eyes, but she gave him a radiant smile. A sketchbook was open on her lap, a half-finished drawing of a soaring dragon visible on the page. She was a gifted artist, her imagination a vibrant, colorful world that was her escape from the confines of her illness. "Did you get it?" she asked, her voice hopeful. Ronan's forced smile faltered. He sat on the edge of her bed, taking her small, cool hand in his. "Not tonight, Alara. There was a mix-up at the pharmacy with the insurance. I have to go back tomorrow and sort it all out." The lie felt clumsy and heavy on his tongue. He hated lying to her. Disappointment flickered across her face, but she quickly hid it. She was used to disappointments. She was a brave little soldier in a war she had never asked to fight. "It's okay, Daddy," she said, squeezing his hand. "I'm not feeling too bad tonight." It was her own lie, a small act of love to protect him from her pain. He could hear the faint wheeze in her breath, see the slight tremor in her hand. He smoothed her dark hair back from her forehead, his heart aching with a fierce, helpless love. He would find a way. He had to. He would sell his grandfather's old watch. He would pick up extra shifts, even if it meant not sleeping. He would do whatever it took. As he tucked her in and turned on her small bedside lamp, he felt the crushing weight of his failure settle over him once more. He was her father, her protector, and he was failing her. Across the city, in her sprawling apartment overlooking the glittering skyline, Olivia Spencer couldn't sleep. The migraine had subsided, but her mind was racing. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, a glass of water in her hand, staring down at the city lights. Each light was a home, a life, a story. And tonight, one of those stories had intersected with hers, leaving an indelible mark. It was just one man, one child. A drop in the ocean of the city's struggles, but it was the drop she had seen. She walked over to her laptop, the screen illuminating her face in the dark room. With a few swift, decisive keystrokes, she logged into her company's internal network. Ronan Hayes. She typed the name into the employee directory, her fingers moving with a newfound sense of purpose. She wasn't sure what she was going to do. She just knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she had to do something. She couldn't just turn the page and pretend she hadn't seen. The fortress around her heart had been breached. The search bar blinked, waiting. Olivia's fingers, which could sign off on $100 million deals without a tremor, hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then, with a firm press of the Enter key, the query was sent. A single result appeared on the screen almost instantly. Hayes Ronan. Employee ID 77B-419. Department, Archival Services and Logistics Position, Archivist. 2. She clicked on the file. His photo, a simple unsmiling ID badge picture, looked back at her. It was him. The same tired eyes, the same quiet resilience etched into the lines around his mouth. She scanned the details. Start date, 4 years ago. Status, full-time. Below that was his salary. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She knew, intellectually, what the company paid its lower-level staff, But seeing the stark number connected to the face of the desperate man from the pharmacy was different. It was a poverty wage in a city this expensive. How could anyone raise a child on that? Then she saw his attendance record. It was a solid, unbroken wall of green. Perfect attendance for 4 straight years. Not a single sick day. Not one. Her eyes scanned down to the emergency contact information. Name: Ilara Hayes. Relationship: daughter. A small note in the file, added by HR when his wife's insurance had been removed from his plan, read, "Spouse. Deceased." The screen blurred. Olivia leaned back, the leather of her executive chair groaning in the silence of the penthouse. The story the data told was stark and brutal. A single father, a widower, working a thankless dead-end job for wages that barely kept his head above water. A man who came to work every single day, no matter how sick his daughter was, because he couldn't afford not to. He was a ghost in her machine, a vital moving part that was completely and utterly invisible. And she had almost walked right past him. The next morning, the city was washed clean by the storm. Sunlight streamed into Olivia's corner office on the 50th floor, glinting off the glass and steel that made up her kingdom. But the brightness did little to lift the shadow that had settled in her mind. She was staring at a photo on her desk, her son beaming in his lacrosse uniform, when a sharp rap on the door broke her concentration. "Olivia, you have a moment." Gareth Blackwood entered without waiting for an answer. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a suit that cost more than Ronan Hayes made in a month, and he wore a smile that never quite reached his cold, calculating eyes. He was her rival, the sharpest shark in the corporate tank, and he made no secret of his ambition to occupy her chair. "Gareth," she acknowledged, her tone neutral. "What can I do for you?" "Just wanted to touch base on the Axion merger," he said, settling into the chair opposite her desk with an air of ownership. "The due diligence is getting messy. Their books are a labyrinth. I think we need to be prepared for some restructuring, trimming the fat, so to speak. A lot of redundancies in the lower-level departments, logistics, records, the kind of people who are just taking up space on the payroll." He was testing her, watching for her reaction. Olivia felt a muscle in her jaw tighten. A day ago, she would have agreed. It was just business. But now, the phrase lower-level departments conjured the image of Ronan Hayes. "Everyone at this company serves a purpose, Gareth," she said, her voice cooler than she intended. "We'll make our decisions based on data, not assumptions." Gareth's smile widened slightly. "Of course. Always by the book." He stood up, smoothing his tie. "Just wanted to be sure we were on the same page." He paused at the door. "By the way, that charity gala's next week. I trust you'll be making the company's usual generous donation? Good optics, especially with the merger so close." He was gone before she could reply, leaving a chill in the air. Meanwhile, in the basement of the very same building, Ronan Hayes was surrounded by the ghosts of the company's past. The archives were a sprawling, climate-controlled cavern of shelves, filled with boxes containing a century of corporate history. It was a quiet, forgotten place, and Ronan liked it that way. He handled the fragile documents and ledgers with a reverence that bordered on love. He saw the stories in them, the risks taken, the fortunes made and lost. He was the caretaker of a legacy he would never be a part of. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his neighbor, Mrs. Gable, the kind elderly woman who watched Ilara after school. "Her fever is up a little. She's asking for you." Ronan's heart seized. He texted back a quick thank you, his fingers fumbling on the small screen. He had 4 more hours until his shift ended. 4 hours that felt like an eternity. He looked at the boxes around him, filled with the records of multi-million-dollar deals, and felt a bitter, helpless anger rise in his chest. None of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was his little girl, and he was stuck in a basement, powerless to help her. Upstairs, Olivia had made a decision. She buzzed her head of human resources, Carol Jennings, a warm, discreet woman who had been with the company for 30 years. "Carol, could you come to my office, please? And bring the physical file for an employee named Ronan Hayes from the archives." Carol arrived minutes later, a questioning look in her eyes as she handed the thin folder to Olivia. It was highly unusual for the CEO to request the file of a mailroom employee. Olivia opened it. Tucked inside was the original employment application. Stapled to the corner was a small, slightly faded photograph of Ronan. He was smiling, a genuine, happy smile. Next to him was a little girl of about 4, with big, laughing eyes and a missing front tooth. Ilara, before the illness had taken hold, before her father's smile had been replaced by the weary exhaustion she'd seen last night. That was it. That was the final push. "Carol," Olivia said, closing the folder. Her voice was firm, leaving no room for questions. "I want to make a grant from the Sterling Employee Emergency Fund. Anonymously. I want it processed today." Carol's eyebrows shot up. "The emergency fund? Olivia, that hasn't been used in years. I'm not even sure." "I'm sure," Olivia cut her off. "The provision allows for grants in cases of extreme medical or personal hardship, correct?" "Well, yes. But it's at the CEO's discretion, and it's a logistical—" "Then I am using my discretion," Olivia stated. "The grant is for Ronan Hayes. The amount should be enough to cover 3 months of his daughter's medical expenses. And Carol," she added, her gaze locking with her HR heads, "this is to be completely confidential. No one is to know the grant originated from me. Is that understood?" Carol, seeing the unwavering resolve in her boss's eyes, simply nodded. "Understood, Olivia." As Carol left the office, Olivia felt a sense of relief so profound it almost made her dizzy. It was a clean, simple solution. By the book, as Gareth would say. Anonymous, untraceable to her, but it would get Ronan the money he desperately needed. She had fixed the problem. She had righted a small wrong in the world. She leaned back in her chair, allowing herself a small, satisfied smile. It was done. She had no way of knowing that her simple act of kindness was about to collide with Gareth Blackwood's ruthless ambition, creating a storm that would threaten to destroy them all. Carol Jennings was a woman who believed in the quiet efficiency of rules and processes. For 30 years, she had navigated the complex currents of Sterling Innovations, her loyalty to the company, and specifically to the Spencer family who built it, as solid and unshakable as the building's foundation. Olivia's request was the most unusual directive she had received in years, but a directive it was. She unlocked a dusty filing cabinet, retrieved the long-forgotten paperwork for the emergency fund, and got to work. Within an hour, the grant was approved, processed, and flagged for immediate transfer. Her final step was to make the official notification call. Down in the archives, Ronan's phone buzzed, the screen displaying a number he didn't recognize but knew belonged to the corporate office upstairs. His heart sank. A call from HR on a weekday afternoon was never good news. It meant budget cuts, layoffs, or a reprimand. With a trembling hand, he answered. "This is Ronan Hayes." "Mr. Hayes, this is Carol Jennings from Human Resources." The voice on the other end was professional, but not unkind. "I'm calling with some good news. You have been selected as a recipient of a grant from the Sterling Employee Emergency Fund." Ronan's mind went blank. He leaned against a metal shelf for support, the cold steel a stark contrast to the sudden heat rushing to his face. The what? "I think you have the wrong person. The fund is an anonymous discretionary program to assist employees facing significant personal hardship," Carol explained patiently. "Your case was brought to the committee's attention, and you were approved for a grant. The funds have just been transferred to your direct deposit account. They should be available immediately." Disbelief warred with a desperate, burgeoning hope in Ronan's chest. It felt like a dream or a cruel prank. "Why me?" I don't understand." The benefactor and the committee remain anonymous, Mr. Hayes. Just know that your dedication to this company has not gone unnoticed. We hope this helps with whatever challenges you and your family are facing." After they hung up, Ronan stood frozen for a full minute, the silence of the archives pressing in on him. Then, with shaking fingers, he pulled out his phone and opened his banking app. He held his breath as the page loaded. And then he saw it, a balance that was higher than any he had ever seen. There were commas. Tears welled in his eyes, hot and fast, blurring the numbers on the screen. It was real. It was a miracle. Up on the 50th floor, Gareth Blackwood's office was the antithesis of the dusty archives. It was a minimalist space of chrome and black leather, sterile and cold. He was speaking into a headset, his voice a low, confidential murmur. "Are you sure you can do it without being traced?" On the other end of the secure line, a nervous young IT technician stammered, "Yes, Mr. Blackwood. I can clone the access permissions. When the data is copied, the server logs will show it was accessed from a terminal in the archival department. It will look like someone down there plugged in an unauthorized drive." "Excellent," Gareth said, a predatory smile touching his lips. He was looking at a blueprint of the Axion merger, a deal that would make him a legend if he could steer it his way. But Olivia was in his path, cautious, methodical, and respected by the board. He needed to make her look like she had lost control of her own company, that a security breach this massive could happen right under her nose. "And the target terminal?" Gareth asked. "There are several, but one has seen a lot of historical data access recently for the merger's centennial report. Terminal 4B. The system shows it's assigned to an archivist, A. Ronan Hayes." "Perfect," Gareth repeated, the name meaning nothing to him beyond its usefulness. "Initiate the transfer tonight, after hours. Create the false log. Then wipe our communications. You'll find the second half of your payment in your account by morning." He ended the call and swiveled in his chair to look out at the city. He would leak the stolen data to a financial blogger tomorrow, disguised as a concerned whistleblower. The stock would tumble. The board would panic. And Olivia Spencer would be left scrambling to explain how her own mailroom staff had managed to sabotage the biggest deal in the company's history. Ronan, oblivious to the plot circling him, was a man reborn. The first call he made was to the pharmacy. "Mark, it's Ronan Hayes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm coming for Alara's prescription. I can pay for it." He then called Mrs. Gable, his voice cracking with relief as he told her he was leaving work early to take Alara to a follow-up appointment he'd been putting off. He practically ran to the elevator, his heart pounding with a joy so fierce it felt like it might burst. As he crossed the grand sunlit lobby of the Sterling Innovations Tower, a place he usually tried to pass through as quickly and invisibly as possible, he nearly collided with a group of executives. At their center, looking powerful and impossibly elegant in a dark blue suit, was Olivia Spencer. She was laughing at something one of her team had said, but her eyes lifted as he approached. For a single, charged second, their gazes met. He saw the CEO of the company, the woman who held the fates of thousands in her hands. He gave her a small, respectful nod, the automatic gesture of a low-level employee to the Queen. She saw the man from the pharmacy, but he was different now. The crushing weight of despair was gone from his shoulders, replaced by a light in his eyes that hadn't been there before. She gave him a brief, almost imperceptible nod in return, her expression unreadable. The moment passed. He hurried out the revolving doors, and she was swept along by her entourage. He had no idea he had just looked into the eyes of his anonymous savior, and she had no idea she was watching a man walk into the crosshairs of a corporate conspiracy that she had, in her own way, helped to arm. An hour later, Ronan was holding the small bottle of medicine in his hand. It felt heavier than a brick, more precious than gold. He looked from the bottle to his daughter, who was sitting in the passenger seat of his beat-up car, a hopeful smile on her pale face. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a terrifying, dark abyss. It felt like a promise. Back in his office, Gareth Blackwood clicked his mouse. On his screen, a progress bar began to fill. A silent digital arrow was being fired from the 50th floor, aimed directly at the heart of the archives below. The trap was set. All he had to do now was wait for it to spring. The next 48 hours were the most peaceful Ronan had known in years. The first dose of the new medicine seemed to work a small miracle. The wheeze in Ilara's breathing softened, and a touch of pink returned to her cheeks. They spent the evening drawing together at the kitchen table, Ilara creating a vibrant underwater world, filled with smiling whales and mischievous mermaids. For the first time, she drew herself in the picture, not watching from the shore, but swimming in the bright blue water. "When I'm all better, can we go to the real ocean, Daddy?" she asked, her voice full of a hope that had been absent for so long. Ronan's heart swelled. "You bet we can, sweet pea," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We'll build the biggest sandcastle anyone has ever seen." In that moment, sitting in his humble kitchen, the future felt limitless. The anonymous grant was more than money. It was a second chance. He felt a profound sense of gratitude to the faceless benefactor, a stranger who had looked into his life and decided he was worthy of help. On Monday morning, he went to work with a lightness in his step. He even smiled at the security guard in the lobby. He felt like a part of the world again, not just a shadow moving through it. He had no idea that the world he had just rejoined was about to declare war on him. Olivia Spencer arrived at her office at 7 a.m. to find chaos. Frank, her stoic head of security, was waiting for her, his face grim. "We have a situation, Olivia." "What is it?" she asked, her mind already cycling through a dozen potential corporate crises. "A massive data breach," Frank said, his voice low. "Sometime last night, the entire Axion merger file was downloaded and leaked. It was sent to Sarah Jensen at the Financial Chronicle. She posted the story an hour ago. The stock is hemorrhaging in pre-market trading." The coffee cup in Olivia's hand felt suddenly heavy. She set it down carefully. The Axion file contained their most sensitive negotiation strategies, their valuation data, everything. "How?" she breathed. "Who?" "The initial trace is confusing," Frank admitted. "The breach originated from inside our own network, from a terminal in the archival department." Just then, the door to her office swept open. Gareth Blackwood strode in, his face a mask of theatrical outrage. "Olivia! My God, have you seen the news? This is a catastrophe. The deal is dead in the water. How could your security let this happen?" "We are handling it, Gareth," Olivia said, her voice dangerously calm. She despised the way he used the word, "your security," as if this was her personal failure. "Handling it?" he scoffed. "The board is in an absolute panic. I've already had 3 calls this morning. They want answers. They want a head on a platter. Who's in the archives? Who has that kind of access?" He was steering the narrative, expertly playing the role of the concerned executive. As if on cue, Olivia's head of IT and a younger technician she didn't recognize entered the room. They looked pale and exhausted. "We have a preliminary report, Miss Spencer," the IT head said, handing her a tablet. "The digital footprint is clear. The data was copied to an unauthorized external drive between 2 and 3 a.m. last night from Terminal 4B in the basement." He paused, taking a deep breath. "The terminal is assigned to an archivist." Ronan Hayes Olivia's blood ran cold. The name struck her like a physical blow. "Number. It can't be." "This morning," the technician added, his voice trembling slightly, "a security sweep of the area found a high-capacity flash drive hidden behind a server rack near that terminal. It's been wiped clean, but its signature matches the one used in the breach." It was a neat, tidy package of damning evidence. "Hayes," Gareth mused, pretending to rack his brain. "I don't know the name. We need to bring him in. Now. We have to show the board we are taking decisive action, Olivia. We need to make an example of him." The pressure in the room was immense. Her phone was buzzing incessantly with calls from board members and the press. Every instinct, every bit of her CEO training, told her to follow the evidence, contain the damage, and cut the source of the problem loose. But her gut, the part of her that had witnessed a desperate father's pain, screamed that this was wrong. The timing was too perfect. The evidence was too clean. "Get him," she said to Frank, her voice a low command. "Bring him to the boardroom. No escort in the main elevators. I want this handled discreetly." Ronan was in the middle of cataloging a set of the company's original blueprints from 1925 when the two security guards appeared. They were polite but firm. "Mr. Hayes, you're needed upstairs, on the 50th floor." A cold dread trickled down Ronan's spine as he was led through a service elevator and down the hushed, carpeted hallway to the main boardroom. The immense oak doors swung open, and he stepped inside. The room was intimidating, with its panoramic view of the city and a table long enough to land a small plane on. At the far end sat Olivia Spencer, her face like a stone mask. Standing beside her was Gareth Blackwood, who looked at Ronan with an expression of pure contempt. The head of security, Frank, stood near the door. Ronan's heart hammered against his ribs. Is everything all right?" Gareth stepped forward, his movements like a stalking panther. "No, Mr. Hayes, everything is not all right. Last night, this company suffered the single largest security breach in its history, and all the evidence points directly to you." Ronan stared at him, bewildered. "What?" "Number. I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb with us," Gareth sneered. "We have the server logs. We have the drive you used. We know you copied the Axion merger file and leaked it." "I would never do that," Ronan protested, his voice rising in panic. "I was at home with my daughter all night. I love this company. I would never—" Gareth laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Your loyalty is touching, but it seems it can be bought. You see, we also discovered a large, unexplained deposit made into your bank account 2 days ago. It's quite a sum for a mailroom clerk. Looks like a down payment, doesn't it?" The blood drained from Ronan's face. The grant. The anonymous miracle. They thought it was a bribe. He looked desperately towards Olivia, the woman he had passed in the lobby, the untouchable head of this entire universe. "Ms. Spencer, I can explain that money. It was a grant, from the company's emergency fund. HR called me. You can check." Gareth scoffed. "A grant? How convenient. A secret fund that no one's heard of gives a random archivist thousands of dollars right before he commits corporate treason? The board will love that story." Ronan's last hope withered. It sounded insane. He looked at Olivia, his eyes pleading. "Please," he whispered. Olivia felt the walls of the trap slam shut around her. She was the only person in the room who knew he was telling the truth about the money. She knew he wasn't a spy who had been paid off. But to reveal that, to admit she had personally authorized an anonymous grant to this specific man, right before he became the center of a corporate scandal, Gareth would tear her apart. He would paint her as a corrupt CEO playing favorites, or worse, as a naive fool covering for her criminal subordinate. Her career would be over. Gareth pressed his advantage. "Well, Olivia, what do you say? Do you believe this ridiculous story?" She looked at Ronan's pale, terrified face, and then at Gareth's triumphant, predatory smile. He had planned this. He had backed her into an impossible corner. Every rational thought told her to save herself. But the image of that small, hand-drawn mermaid swimming in a bright blue ocean flashed in her mind. She was trapped. The silence in the boardroom was a living thing, heavy and suffocating. Ronan Hayes stood before them, stripped bare by the accusation, his plea hanging in the air. Gareth Blackwood's smirk was one of pure, reptilian satisfaction. He had her. He had laid the perfect trap, and now he was simply waiting for the jaws to snap shut. Every person in the room, Frank, the IT head, the nervous technician, was looking at Olivia Spencer, waiting for the verdict. Olivia's mind, usually a seamless engine of logic and strategy, was at war with itself. "Fire him," the CEO part of her brain commanded. "He is a liability. The evidence is clean. The board will demand it. Cut the loss and save the company. Save yourself." It was the logical, rational, and self-preserving thing to do. But then there was the other voice, the one she hadn't heard in years. The voice that had been stirred by the sight of a desperate father in a pharmacy. "He's innocent," it whispered. "You know he's innocent. This is a setup. Look at Gareth. He's practically preening." She looked at Ronan. She saw the raw terror in his eyes, but underneath it, she saw an honest man's bewildered outrage. This was not the face of a corporate spy. This was the face of a man whose miracle had just been twisted into a weapon against him. And then she looked at Gareth, his eyes gleaming with ambition. He hadn't just framed a random employee. He had used her own act of kindness, her one moment of anonymous compassion, as the linchpin of his entire scheme. He was counting on her to sacrifice Ronan to save herself. And in that instant, something inside Olivia snapped. She drew in a slow, deliberate breath, and when she spoke, her voice was not the voice of a panicked executive, but of a queen reasserting control over her court. "The evidence, as presented, is alarming," she began, her gaze sweeping over the room before landing on Gareth. "But it is also, at this stage, entirely circumstantial. We have logs and a conveniently discovered flash drive, but we have no motive, no confession, and no direct proof of a data transfer to an outside party." Gareth's smile faltered. "Olivia, for God's sake, don't be naive. The motive is sitting in his bank account. A bank account which he has voluntarily offered an explanation for," Olivia countered, her voice like ice. "An explanation that can be verified or disproven by our own HR department. I will not condemn an employee with a perfect 4-year record based on a tidy but uncorroborated report." She stood up, placing her hands flat on the polished table, claiming her authority. "Here is what is going to happen. Mr. Hayes," she said, turning to Ronan, "you are being placed on indefinite administrative leave with full pay, pending the outcome of a complete and thorough investigation. You will surrender your ID badge and any company property. You are not to discuss this matter with anyone." To Frank, she said, "I want a full independent forensic audit of this breach. Not by our internal team. I want the best outside firm we can get. I want every log, every kilobyte of data, and every second of security footage from that entire floor examined. I want to know not just what happened, but how it was possible." Gareth was apoplectic. "An outside audit? That will take weeks. The board wants action, not committees." "The board wants the truth," Olivia shot back, her eyes flashing with a fire he had not seen before. "And they want to be assured that our response is comprehensive, not just a knee-jerk reaction to a press leak. Firing a low-level archivist without an exhaustive investigation would look like we're finding a quick scapegoat, not solving a systemic failure. I will not project weakness, Gareth. And I am still the CEO of this company. This is my call." Her authority was absolute, her logic unassailable. Gareth was momentarily silenced, his face flushing with fury. He had expected her to crumble, to fire Ronan and create a mess he could exploit. Instead, she had seized control, wrapping her defense of Ronan in the impenetrable armor of corporate due diligence. Ronan was escorted out of the room in a daze. He wasn't fired. He wasn't in handcuffs. He was on paid leave. He didn't understand what had just happened, but as the heavy doors closed behind him, he knew one thing. Olivia Spencer had looked at him, and for some reason he couldn't comprehend. She hadn't thrown him to the wolves. The journey home was surreal. He felt like a man who had walked away from a car crash without a scratch, but was still shaking from the shock. When he walked through his apartment door, Ilara ran to him, her face alight with a joy that stabbed him in the heart. "Daddy, you're home early." He knelt and hugged her, burying his face in her hair, trying to compose himself. Mrs. Gable looked at him with concern. "Is everything all right, Ronan?" "Everything's fine," he lied, forcing another smile. He spent the rest of the afternoon building a pillow fort with Ilara, his laughter sounding hollow in his own ears. How could he explain to her that her miracle medicine had cost him his job, his reputation, and possibly his freedom? How could he tell her that the hope of the last 2 days had been a lie? Back in her office, Olivia was a general preparing for war. The moment Gareth had left her office, spitting veiled threats about the board, she had locked the door. She knew her own IT department was compromised. She knew the independent firm the company would hire could be influenced by Gareth. She needed someone off the books, someone loyal only to her. She pulled out a private cell phone and dialed a number from memory. "Zane," she said when the line connected. "It's Olivia Spencer." A calm, level voice replied from the other end. "Olivia, it's been a long time. I assume you're not calling to reminisce about business school." Zane was a cybersecurity savant, a digital ghost who had built a legendary career by being the person powerful people called when their official channels had failed. He was discreet, brilliant, and fiercely expensive. "I need you, Zane," Olivia said, her voice low and urgent. "I have a situation here, a data breach, but I believe the evidence has been fabricated to frame an innocent man. I need you to find the truth. I need you to trace the real source of the leak. And I need you to do it without anyone inside my company knowing you exist. Can you do it?" There was a pause on the other end. "Who am I hunting?" Zane asked. "A member of my board," Olivia replied. "Gareth Blackwood." Another pause, this one shorter. "It'll be costly." "I don't care about the cost," Olivia said, her gaze fixed on the sprawling city below. "Find me the proof, Zane. Find me the real traitor." She ended the call and stood by the window, the weight of her decision settling on her shoulders. She had risked her career, defied her board, and hired a corporate mercenary, all for a quiet archivist she barely knew. It was illogical. It was reckless. But as she thought of Ronan's terrified face, she knew it was the only choice she could have made. The battle lines were drawn, and she had just fired the first secret shot. The days that followed were a strange, surreal limbo for Ronan. He was a man on house arrest with an open door. The money in his bank account was a constant, comforting presence, allowing him to buy Ilara's medicine without a second thought and to fill their fridge with fresh, healthy food. He had time, a luxury he hadn't experienced since his wife passed away. They spent afternoons in the park, Ilara's laughter growing stronger as the medicine worked its magic. He was present for every meal, every bedtime story. In many ways, it was the life he had always dreamed of. But it was all built on a foundation of sand. A dark cloud hung over every happy moment. Every time the phone rang, his stomach plummeted. Every official-looking envelope in the mail sent a jolt of fear through him. He saw the news reports, the talking heads on financial channels discussing the Sterling Innovations breach. They spoke of corporate espionage and shareholder losses, using jargon that felt a world away from his life. Yet he was the unnamed villain at the center of their story. He felt powerless, a pawn in a game whose rules he didn't understand. "Why don't you have to go to work, Daddy?" Ilara asked one afternoon as they were painting watercolors at the kitchen table. "The building is just getting a big checkup," Ronan said, the lie tasting more bitter each time he had to tell it. "So they gave some people a little vacation." She looked at him with her wide, perceptive eyes, and he knew she didn't entirely believe him. She just loved him enough not to ask any more questions. The fear of what this would do to her, of her seeing him as a failure or a criminal, was a heavier weight than any financial burden he had ever carried. While Ronan was living in quiet terror, Gareth Blackwood was on the offensive. He wasn't a man who waited for things to happen. He made them happen. He launched a subtle but venomous campaign against Olivia among the other board members. He didn't attack her directly in their official meetings. Instead, he worked in the shadows, over expensive lunches and confidential phone calls. "I'm just worried about her," he'd say to a powerful board member over a plate of seared scallops, his voice oozing with false concern. "She seems emotionally compromised. This breach has shaken her. stalling with this audit instead of taking swift, decisive action. It projects weakness. The market is smelling blood in the water. He would let the words hang in the air, allowing the poison to seep in. He painted Olivia as a faltering leader, and himself as the strong, steady hand ready to take the reins. Olivia felt the pressure from all sides. The board was growing impatient. The stock price had stabilized but remained bruised. She spent her days in back-to-back meetings, projecting an aura of unshakable confidence she did not feel. She defended her decision for an audit with cool, impeccable logic, all the while running a second, secret war from her office. Her only contact with her ghost operative, Zane, was through encrypted, self-deleting messages that appeared on her private phone at odd hours. The first one had been unsettling. The digital trail is a work of art. The frame is almost perfect. Your boy Blackwood is either a genius or he hired one. The second message, which arrived 2 days later, offered the first glimmer of hope. Found a loose thread, a ghost signal bouncing off a proxy in Eastern Europe. The culprit covered his tracks, but he was in a hurry. Everyone makes a mistake. Give me 48 hours, 48 hours. The 2 days felt like a lifetime. She was holding the line against her entire board, betting her career on a ghost chasing a ghost. On the afternoon of the second day, feeling the walls closing in, Ronan did the only thing he could think of to reclaim a piece of his own story. He sat down with a pen and a single sheet of plain paper and began to write. It was a letter, addressed directly to Olivia Spencer. He knew it would likely be thrown away by a secretary, that she might never see it. But he had to try. He didn't plead or beg. He didn't make excuses or point fingers. He simply and clearly stated his truth. Dear Miss Spencer, my name is Ronan Hayes. I know you are aware of the accusations against me. I am writing to you not to argue my case, but to state, for the record, that I am innocent. I have worked for Sterling Innovations for 4 years. In that time, I have tried to be a good and loyal employee. I have handled documents worth millions of dollars and have always treated my responsibilities with the utmost respect. The idea that I would betray that trust is unthinkable to me. I don't know why this is happening, but I know it is a mistake. I want to thank you for not firing me on the spot. By putting me on leave and ordering a full investigation, you have given me the one thing I asked for, a chance for the truth to be found. Whatever the outcome, I am grateful for that much. My daughter is my whole world, and all I have ever wanted is to be a father she can be proud of. I still hope to be that man. Sincerely, Ronan Hayes. He sealed the envelope, wrote Olivia Spencer's name on it, and walked to the nearest mailbox. As the letter dropped into the darkness, he felt a small measure of peace. He had spoken his truth, even if only to a piece of paper. The next morning, the letter landed on the desk of Olivia's executive assistant, a sharp, impeccably organized woman in her late 50s. Her job was to filter the mountain of mail the CEO received. But something about the simple, handwritten envelope addressed to Miss Spencer caught her eye. It felt personal. Against her better judgment, she did not place it in the general mail pile. Instead, she placed it on top of the stack of urgent documents for Olivia's review. When Olivia arrived in her office, feeling the exhaustion of another sleepless night, she saw it immediately. She picked up the envelope, her name written in a neat, steady hand. She sliced it open with a silver letter opener. As she read Ronan's words, the noise of the corporate battle around her seemed to fade away. The stock prices, the board members' complaints, Gareth's scheming. It all fell away, replaced by the quiet, dignified voice of an innocent man. The letter was not a plea for help. It was a declaration of character. It was a tangible reminder of the man she had seen in the pharmacy and the father she had glimpsed in a faded photograph. It was a reminder of exactly what and who she was fighting for. Her private phone buzzed on the desk. A new message from Zane. It contained only one line. "I have it. It's worse than you think." Olivia's resolve hardened into steel. The 48 hours were up. The wait was over. It was time to go on the attack. Olivia stared at the message from Zane, Ronan's letter a stark white rectangle on her dark mahogany desk. The quiet dignity of his words clashed with the cold, digital threat of Zane's discovery. She jabbed a reply into her secure phone. Secure line. Now. A moment later, the phone vibrated with an incoming call from a blocked number. She answered, her voice low. "Talk to me, Zane." "I hope you're sitting down, Olivia." His voice was stripped of all pleasantries. "Your boy Blackwood isn't just a snake in the grass. He's trying to burn down the whole field." Zane laid it out with chilling precision. The digital trail leading to Ronan's terminal was a masterclass in fabrication. Zane had found the microscopic seams, the digital fingerprints where the server logs had been expertly spliced and rewritten. The external drive found near Ronan's desk? Its internal signature showed it had been wiped and planted less than an hour before security found it. The frame-up was just the appetizer. Zane continued. "I followed that ghost signal. It wasn't easy. He used a chain of proxies that bounced from here to Romania and back. But the kid he used, the IT tech, got sloppy. For about 90 seconds, his primary firewall dropped during the transfer. That was all I needed." "Get to the point, Zane," Olivia said, her knuckles white as she gripped the phone. "The point is, the data wasn't just leaked to that blogger. That was a sideshow, a diversion. The main payload, the entire unredacted Axion file, was sent to a secure, encrypted server. A server I traced back to the chief technology officer of Omnicorp." Olivia felt the air leave her lungs. Omnicorp was their biggest rival, the company that stood to lose the most if the Axion merger succeeded. "This wasn't just about making you look bad, Olivia," Zane said, his voice grim. "This was industrial espionage on a massive scale. Gareth wasn't just trying to take your chair. He was selling out the entire company to our direct competitor. The blogger leak was just noise to make you focus on an internal scapegoat while the real crime went unnoticed. Based on the financial chatter I'm picking up, it looks like he was promised a massive payout and a seat on Omnicorp's board once Sterling was crippled by the failed merger." A cold, diamond-hard fury settled over Olivia. This was a betrayal so profound, so complete, it took her breath away. This wasn't just corporate politics. This was treason. Gareth wasn't just trying to ruin her. He was trying to destroy her father's legacy, the company that bore her family's name. And he had tried to use Ronan Hayes, a good and decent man, as the wrecking ball. "Do you have proof?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "I have everything," Zane said. "I have the full data packet sent to Omnicorp, the hidden communication logs between Gareth and the IT tech, and the offshore account number where the tech received his first payment. I have a recording of Gareth's call to the blogger, feeding him the fake story. I have it all, Olivia. It's a corporate death sentence." For a long moment, Olivia was silent, her mind working, the pieces of the puzzle snapping into a new, horrific picture. Then she began to give orders. "Package it," she said, her voice the calm at the center of a hurricane. "I want a presentation. Simple, clear, and irrefutable. I want video, audio, documents, everything. I want a story that a 5-year-old could understand. And I want it ready by 9 a.m. tomorrow." "It's your war," Zane said. "I'm just the arms dealer." "One more thing," Olivia added. "The IT technician. What's his name?" "Liam Collier, 24 years old. Looks like he has some serious gambling debts." "I want you to have a conversation with Mr. Collier," Olivia said. "Make it clear to him that he has one and only one chance to cooperate. He can be our star witness, or he can be Gareth Blackwood's cellmate." After she hung up, Olivia called Carol Jennings in HR. "Carol, I need you to do something for me, and I need your complete discretion. Contact Ronan Hayes. Tell him he needs to be at my office tomorrow morning at 10 for a final review of his case. Don't give him any other details." "Of course, Olivia," Carol said, sensing the gravity in her boss's tone. Ronan was reading a book to Alara when his phone rang. He saw the Sterling Innovations number and his blood ran cold. He stepped into the kitchen to answer, his hand shaking. It was Carol from HR. Her voice was professional and gave nothing away as she requested his presence at a meeting the next morning. A final review. The words echoed in his head long after he'd hung up. A final review. This was it. The end of the line. They were going to fire him, probably press charges. The temporary reprieve was over. He walked back into the living room, a hollow feeling in his chest. "Who was that, Daddy?" Alara asked, looking up from her book. "Just work, sweet pea," he said, forcing a smile that felt like a grimace. "Just tying up some loose ends." He sat beside her, but the words on the page were a blur. His mind was screaming. He had to prepare for the worst. In her office, Olivia Spencer stood before the grand window, looking down at the city she felt she was fighting for. She had the weapon. She had the evidence. Now, she just needed to choose the battlefield. She walked back to her desk and pulled up her calendar. With a few clicks, she sent out a single, high-priority invitation to every member of the Sterling Innovations Board of Directors, including Gareth Blackwood. The subject line was simple: Emergency Board Meeting, the Axion Merger Breach. The time was set for 10 a.m. the following morning. She leaned back in her chair, Ronan's handwritten letter still sitting on her desk next to the sleek, cold screen of her phone. One represented the soul of the company she was fighting for. The other held the digital proof she would use to save it. She took a deep breath and hit send. The trap was no longer just set. The invitations had gone out. The guests were on their way. Ronan dressed the next morning as if he were preparing for a funeral. His own. He chose his only suit, a slightly too big gray wool that had been his wedding suit. He knotted his tie with clumsy fingers, his throat tight with a fear so profound it was almost paralyzing. He went into Alara's room and watched her sleep for a moment, her chest rising and falling in a steady, healthy rhythm. The sight of her, so peaceful and safe, gave him a sliver of strength. He wrote her a small note, just in case. "I love you more than all the stars, sweet pea. Always. Daddy." He left it on his pillow, a silent testament to his love and his fear. When Olivia Spencer walked into the boardroom at 9:55 a.m., she did not look like a CEO on the brink of losing her company. She looked like a general entering a battlefield she knew she was about to win. Her expression was calm, her movements were measured. She greeted each board member with a polite, cool nod. Gareth Blackwood was already there, holding court at the far end of the table, his confidence a palpable, arrogant force in the room. He gave her a smile that was all teeth. Today, he believed, was his coronation. At precisely 10 a.m., Olivia took her seat at the head of the table. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began, her voice ringing with authority. "As you know, we are here to discuss the Axion breach and the future of this company." Gareth seized the opening just as she knew he would. He stood up, placing his hands on the table. "Indeed, Olivia. And I believe the first order of business must be to address the catastrophic failure of leadership that allowed this to happen." He launched into a polished, cutting speech about accountability, about the need for a strong hand to guide them through the crisis. It was a thinly veiled coup attempt, and he ended it by looking directly at her. "Therefore, I believe it is my duty to this board to call for a vote of no confidence in our current CEO." The room grew thick with tension. The other board members shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Olivia's gaze. Olivia let the silence hang for a beat. Then she gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Thank you for your input, Gareth. An interesting opening. Before we vote on my future, however, there is one more person who needs to be in this room." She nodded to her assistant standing by the door. "Please show him in." The heavy doors swung open, and Ronan Hayes was escorted inside. He was pale, and his suit was dated, but he held his head high. The board members stared, whispering amongst themselves. Gareth looked momentarily thrown off balance, but quickly recovered, a look of contemptuous amusement on his face. "Really, Olivia? What is this? A last-ditch appeal to pity? This is a board matter, not a stage for your pet projects. He is the man you have accused, Gareth. I believe he has a right to be here, Olivia said calmly. But you're right. This isn't just about him. There is someone else we need to hear from. She nodded to her assistant again. Please. The doors opened a second time. This time, Frank, the head of security, walked in. Beside him, looking terrified and about to be sick, was the young IT technician, Liam Collier. The moment Gareth saw him, the blood drained from his face. His confident smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of pure panic. He knew. In that instant, he knew the game was over. Let's begin, Olivia said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. She dimmed the lights with a remote, and the large screen at the end of the room lit up. This is a summary of the findings from our independent investigation. What followed was the systematic, brutal demolition of Gareth Blackwood. Zane's presentation was a masterpiece of digital warfare. It started with a graphic showing the server logs, with the fabricated entries glowing red. It showed the digital signature of the planted flash drive and traced its origin not to Ronan, but to a batch ordered by Gareth's own executive assistant. It moved on to the encrypted chats between Liam and Gareth, the words appearing on the screen in stark, white text. The archivist is the perfect target. No one will look twice. It showed the bank records, the payment to Liam's offshore account. And then came the masterstroke. It showed the data packet, the real data packet, moving from Liam's terminal, bouncing through a series of proxies, and landing on a server belonging to Omnicorp's chief technology officer. A collective gasp went through the room. This wasn't a simple leak. This was treason. Gareth was on his feet, sputtering. This is a fabrication. Lies! You can't possibly— Olivia paused the presentation. She turned her cold, furious gaze on the trembling IT technician. Mr. Collier, she said, her voice dangerously soft. Would you like to add anything to Mr. Blackwood's defense? Liam broke. Tears streamed down his face as he stumbled forward. He made me do it, he cried, pointing a shaking finger at Gareth. He knew about my debts. He threatened to ruin me. He promised me money, a lot of money, just to copy the file and set up the archivist. I never wanted to— Oh, God. The confession sucked the last bit of air from the room. The board stared at Gareth, their expressions a mixture of horror and disgust. Ronan, standing by the wall, felt his knees go weak. He was watching his name being cleared in real time, watching a powerful, evil man be brought down by a woman he had thought was his enemy. Gareth looked around, his eyes wild, searching for an escape that wasn't there. The word of a disgraced, crying child. That's your proof? He's lying to save himself. Is he? Olivia asked. She pressed another button on the remote. Then perhaps you can explain this. Gareth's own voice suddenly filled the silent boardroom, crisp and clear from hidden speakers. It was the audio from his call to the financial blogger. The source is inside Sterling, a disgruntled employee in the records department. Yes, that's right. You can quote me on that. It's a failure of leadership from the top down. Checkmate. The sound of his own voice, so confident and treacherous, was the final nail in his coffin. Gareth Blackwood froze, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. The audio played on, every word a shovel of dirt on his corporate grave. And in that moment, Ronan Hayes looked at Olivia Spencer, who was standing tall and resolute at the head of the table. He wasn't looking at the untouchable CEO anymore. He was looking at his champion, the woman who had, against all odds, believed in him, and had just dismantled his accuser with the precision of a master surgeon. The power in the room had not just shifted. It had been completely and utterly remade. The last recorded word from Gareth's treacherous phone call echoed and then died, leaving a silence in the boardroom that was more damning than any shout. The dozen board members, titans of industry who thought they had seen everything, sat in stunned immobility. They looked from Gareth's ashen, horrified face to the calm, resolute woman at the head of the table. Gareth Blackwood, a man whose entire life was built on confidence and control, seemed to shrink before their eyes. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was a king whose castle had just been vaporized around him. An older board member, a man named Arthur Vance, who had served with Olivia's father, was the first to find his voice. It was a low, rumbling growl of pure disgust. "Gareth, you are a disgrace to this company and to everything we have ever tried to build." That single sentence broke the spell. A murmur of outrage swept through the room. Olivia stood up. She didn't look at the board. She looked directly at her vanquished foe. "Frank," she said, her voice clear and cold, addressing the head of security, "please escort Mr. Blackwood from the premises. His network access, his building credentials, everything is to be revoked immediately. I believe the police and the FBI will have some questions for him. I took the liberty of inviting them. They are waiting downstairs." 2 uniformed officers entered the room, their presence a stark and final punctuation mark on Gareth's career. As they moved towards him, Gareth finally collapsed into his chair, a broken man. He didn't protest or fight as they led him away, his expensive suit looking like a costume on a man who had lost everything. With Gareth gone, Olivia turned her attention back to the shocked faces around the table. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice now filled with the calm, reassuring authority of a true leader. "We have been betrayed, but this company is stronger than the greed of one man. I have already been in contact with our legal team and a crisis management firm. We will be fully transparent with the authorities and with our shareholders. We will turn this crisis into a testament to our company's resilience and integrity." She laid out her plan with swift, brilliant precision, and one by one, the board members nodded, their confidence in her not just restored, but solidified into unwavering loyalty. They filed out of the room slowly, many stopping to place a hand on her shoulder or to offer a quiet word of support and admiration. Finally, the vast, silent room was empty, save for 3 people: Olivia Spencer, Frank, and Ronan Hayes, who was still standing by the wall, trying to process the impossible whirlwind of the last hour. Frank gave Olivia a respectful nod. "Well done, ma'am." He then turned and discreetly left the room, closing the heavy oak doors behind him, leaving the CEO and the archivist alone. The silence that fell between them was different now. It wasn't tense or accusatory. It was heavy with unspoken words. Ronan felt like he was looking at a stranger. The powerful, distant executive was gone, replaced by a woman with a weary but determined look in her eyes. He finally found his voice, though it was little more than a choked whisper. "Thank you," he said, the words feeling impossibly small. You saved my life, my daughter's life. I don't know what to say." Olivia walked towards him, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. She stopped a few feet away, her expression softening. "I knew you were innocent, Ronan." He shook his head, a look of profound confusion on his face. "But how?" No one would have believed my story about the grant. It sounded insane. A small, sad smile touched Olivia's lips. "I believed it," she said softly, "because I was the one who authorized it." She watched as his mind tried to catch up, his eyes widening in disbelief. "I was in the pharmacy that night, Ronan," she continued, her voice gentle. "I was in the next aisle. I saw you, I saw the prescription, and I saw the choice you had to make. No parent should ever have to do that." Ronan stared at her, stunned into absolute silence. It was like the final, missing piece of a puzzle he didn't even know he was solving had just clicked into place. The miracle grant hadn't been a random act of a faceless committee. It had been her. This powerful, intimidating woman had seen him in his lowest, most private moment of shame and failure, and she had responded not with pity, but with a quiet, decisive act of grace. The knowledge was so overwhelming, he felt his legs might give out. "You?" he finally breathed. She simply nodded. "My rival used my attempt to help you as a weapon against both of us. For that, I am truly sorry for what you and your family have been put through." "Sorry?" he said, a tear he didn't even feel coming tracing a path down his cheek. "Ms. Spencer, you have nothing to be sorry for. You gave my daughter her health back, and then you gave me my name back. How can I ever repay you?" "You can start by calling me Olivia," she said with a small smile. "And you can repay me by bringing your integrity to work every day. But not in the archives." Ronan looked confused. "I don't understand." "A man with your character, your dedication. You shouldn't be hidden in a basement, Ronan. You should be a part of this company's heart," she said, her voice filled with a new energy. "I'm restructuring the Sterling Foundation, our company's charitable arm. For too long, it's been about writing checks for galas to get good PR. I want to change that. I want its primary mission to be supporting our own employees. I want to build a system that ensures no one who works for this company ever has to make the choice you had to make in that pharmacy. I need someone to run it, someone who understands, someone with integrity." She looked him directly in the eye, her gaze unwavering. "I want that person to be you. I want you to be the new director of the Sterling Foundation." Ronan's mind reeled. Director! The word didn't compute. An hour ago, he was a disgraced archivist preparing for jail. Now he was being offered an executive position, a chance to build the very safety net he had so desperately needed. He looked at Olivia, at the sincere, powerful belief in her eyes, and felt the last of his fear and despair wash away, replaced by a wave of gratitude so profound it left him speechless. His world hadn't just been saved. It had been remade. For a long moment, Ronan could do nothing but stare at her, the words hanging in the air between them. Director. It was a title from another universe, a life he couldn't have imagined in his wildest dreams. He thought of the endless nights spent worrying about money, the soul-crushing weight of his helplessness, and he thought of all the other people like him, the invisible cogs in the corporate machine, fighting their own quiet, desperate battles. He saw a chance not just to save himself, but to be the miracle for someone else that Olivia had been for him. He finally found his voice, and when he spoke, it was with a quiet, steady conviction. "Yes," he said. "Mrs. Spencer, Olivia. Yes, I would be honored." A year passed. The world kept turning, but for the people inside Sterling Innovations, it was turning in a better direction. The name Ronan Hayes was no longer associated with a basement archive, but with a bright, welcoming office on the 3rd floor. The door was always open. Inside, Ronan sat across from a young woman from the marketing department, a single mother whose son had just been diagnosed with juvenile diabetes. Her eyes were filled with the same fear he remembered so well. "The Foundation's new supplementary insurance will cover all of his insulin and supplies," Ronan explained, his voice gentle and reassuring. "And we have a network of counselors and support groups for parents. You're not alone in this. This company takes care of its own." The woman burst into tears, not of fear, but of overwhelming relief. Ronan simply passed her a box of tissues and waited, giving her the space and dignity to feel her emotions. He was good at this job. He understood the language of quiet desperation, and he knew how to translate it into hope. He had become the heart of the company, the living embodiment of its new ethos. The Sterling Foundation, under his leadership, had transformed the corporate culture. Productivity and employee loyalty had soared, not because of bonuses or stock options, but because the people who worked there felt seen. They knew that if they fell, there was a safety net, woven with real compassion, that would catch them. Ilara was a different girl. The medicine, combined with the security of her new life, had allowed her to flourish. She was no longer pale and tired. She was a vibrant, energetic 9-year-old with an unstoppable passion for art and a surprisingly powerful kick on the soccer field. Her laughter, once a rare and precious sound, was now the constant soundtrack of Ronan's life. On a bright, warm Saturday afternoon, Ronan and Olivia sat on a park bench, watching Ilara and Olivia's son, Alex, who was home from boarding school for the weekend, chase a soccer ball across a wide green lawn. The relationship between them had evolved into a deep, easy friendship built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared purpose. They were partners in the truest sense of the word, rebuilding a company's soul, one employee at a time. "Look at her," Ronan said, his voice thick with an emotion that never quite went away. "A year ago, I wasn't sure. I just wasn't sure." "She's strong, Ronan," Olivia said, her gaze soft as she watched the children play. Just like her father. A comfortable silence settled between them. They were two single parents from two different worlds, brought together by a chance encounter in a pharmacy. "Do you ever think about that night?" Ronan asked quietly. Olivia turned to him, a thoughtful smile on her lips. "Sometimes. I think about the woman I was, walking through that store, wrapped up in my own stress. The woman who almost kept walking." She shook her head slightly. "She was successful, but she was poor in a way she didn't even understand." "And I think about the man I was," Ronan said, his eyes on his laughing daughter. "A man who thought he had failed at the only thing that mattered. You didn't just give me a grant that night, Olivia. You saw me. When I felt completely invisible, you saw me." "What I saw was a father's love," she said. "It was the most powerful thing in that entire store. It's the most powerful thing in this entire company." She was right. The story of what had happened in that boardroom had become a quiet legend within the company. It wasn't just the story of a villain getting his due. It was the story of a CEO who chose integrity over expediency, and of an archivist who had become a director. It was a story that said character was worth more than status. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grass. Ilara, her cheeks flushed and her eyes bright, kicked the ball one last time towards a laughing Alex before running towards them. She threw her arms around Ronan's neck, her small body radiating warmth and life. "So, that's the end of our story. I really hope a piece of it stays with you. If there was a moment, or even just a character that really hit home, I'd honestly be honored to read about it in the comments. It's just amazing to see how one story can land in so many different ways. Look, if you believe stories like this are a kind of light we need in the world, your support means everything. When you like and subscribe, you're doing more than just helping a channel grow. You're really casting a vote for stories that aren't afraid to look at what makes us human, and you're helping that light find someone who might be in the dark. Thank you for lending me your time. It means a lot. Until the next chapter, take care of yourselves and each other."